Well, welcome to the Budget Mom YouTube channel. I'm Kamika Love from thebudgetmom.com, and today we're going to be talking about budget categories. Now, I get a lot of questions all about budget categories, and it is a really important topic, especially when we're talking about organizing our budget and our spending. And one of the questions I get is, Miko, how many budget categories should I have? That's a really hard answer to come up with, especially if you have never tracked your spending before. There's a fine line between having too much budget categories, too many, and having too little. So if you have a lot of budget categories and you're dealing with like 60 different budget categories, then it can get really hard and very overwhelming, especially with looking at all of that data and that spending. It can become confusing and very overwhelming. But if you don't have enough budget categories and you've simplified it too much, it's going to be really hard for you to pick out the problem areas in your spending and identify those habits, those spending habits, or maybe problems in your spending that you may not recognize in your life. So too many is not good and too little is not good. You want to find that right balance. So how do you do that? Today we're going to be looking at how I come up with my budget categories. And there's a very simple process, a very visual process for you to discover your own budget categories. Now, I should note, everybody has different budget categories. Why? Because everybody is spending on different things. And not only that, when it comes to the organization of spending, the most important thing is consistency and making sure you understand how you are organizing your spending. That is the most important thing. If you want to put your phone bill in your household category instead of your utilities, because in your mind, that's where it makes sense, then that's what you need to do. Even though most people put their, say, cell phone bill under the utility category. I put my phone bill under my utility category, but I do have some expenses. For instance, my son's insurance. A lot of people would put that under their insurance category. I don't. I put it under my son's category. I have a budget category titled James, and that's where I put it. So it really is important that when you are organizing your spending into categories, it makes sense to you, because that leads to consistency, and consistency leads to noticeable trends. That's what we're doing with our budget categories. That's why it's so important to organize our spending. We are looking for spending habits, whether we are aware of them or we're not. We're also looking for what I call leaks in our spending. Places where we're losing money and we're not really sure where it's going. It's just kind of leaking out of our wallets. So we want to identify those things. So today I'm going to show you, like I said, how I come up with my budget categories and how I stay consistent and organize my spending. So when you're just starting out with budgeting, you might find that you're sitting there tracking your spending and you get to maybe an item that you purchased and you go, gosh, I can't remember what category I put that in the last time I spent on that item. So it's hard to figure out that consistency in the beginning. So what I've created, I have a budget category organizer. Now this organizer is available in my free resource library. This helps with organizing your spending into categories. It also helps you with consistency among the purchases that you have in your life. So, for instance, one month I might put my Hulu spending under my fun and entertainment budget category. The next month I wouldn't put Hulu under my utilities. You want to stay consistent and keep it in the same budget category, so that way when you're analyzing your spending from month to month or from tracking period to tracking period, you have that consistency. So how do you come up with your budget categories? It starts with tracking your spending. Now I use the highlighter method, and this is the method that makes my spending visual. It also helps you visually see your spending categories when you're just starting out with the budgeting process. I'm a manual tracker. So I track my expenses just on an expense tracker, and I use different colored highlighters. Just like you saw on my budget category organizer, each color represents a different budget category. So when I highlight that expense on my expense tracker, it's very easy for me to know, okay, what budget category that falls under. It also helps you notice, and we'll flip to my cash expense tracker, you can see that a lot of my cash spending in a second, very visually, where it went. It went under my savings because this whole page is in teal, which is the color for my savings. So it helps visually to see it that way a couple different ways. So how do you come up with your budget categories? I would track your expenses for at least a month. Or if you don't want to wait a full month, I would pull your bank statements for the last month, and you can highlight directly onto your bank statements. Once you have this done and you have all of your different expenses written down, then you would go through and you would highlight like transactions. For example, all of my food purchases are in this blue color. All of my gas and car purchases are in this purple color. All of my fun and entertainment are in this green color. You'll start to notice when you are looking at your spending in this way, when it's written down, like transactions. It will stand out to you. Once you are done with that, I would create a key for yourself. And in this example, we're looking at my February. I added up all the different colors. All of my blue transactions equaled $48 for my checking account. All of my holiday expenses, which I didn't spend anything for holiday, would be under orange. I go through and add up all the colors. And then you'll be able to see how much you spent in that budgeting category for a specific amount of time or a specific time period. The main thing here, though, is to know what you're spending your money on and to start organizing it into category using the highlighter method. So that's what you're gonna do and how you're gonna start looking at initially your budget categories. Now, when you get to this point and you say to yourself, well, geez, Miko, I don't know if my food should include eating out or groceries. Or maybe you get to your household category and it's a bunch of different transactions. You're gonna come into some transactions also that are kind of like one-off transactions. They don't really fit into like your normal budget categories. Then you need to figure out where you need to place it. And if you see that type of transaction over and over and over again, then I would start a new budget category for it, because that way you know, hey, I need to pay attention to this. This type of spending in my life is showing up a lot. Now for me, you can look at my budget category organizer. Under food, my food budget category includes eating out and groceries, but I know I have a lot of community members and a lot of clients that break out their eating out from their groceries. Why do they do that? Because they want to analyze just their eating out. They want to see exactly how much they're only spending on eating out. So they can gauge, hey, am I overspending in this one little specific area of my budget? It might be a problem spending area for them that they want to track and break down further. Now, these are my budget categories. I currently have 14. I don't use all of these budget categories every single month. You can see that, for instance, for holiday, I didn't spend anything. But I still have that category in my budget because there are some months that I will spend it. I've used these 14 budget categories for a very long time because they work for me. It's not overly complicated where I have like 40 budget categories, but it's also not just one or two budget categories. I've found my balance of analyzing and tracking my spending. It tells me just enough information for me to see trends. And one of the ways that I see trends within my budget categories is inside the Budget by Paycheck workbook. I use the monthly budget category breakdown. Where did my dollars go when it comes to breaking it down into these budget categories? One of the biggest areas for me for a long time was my beauty and health. That's why I have my own category for that, just those things. And my beauty and health includes Peloton, lotions, shower supplies. I don't buy makeup. Another one that I should add here would be nail supplies. I do my nails at home, so nail polish I would put under health and beauty, and I'll add that right here to my little box. Now these boxes on your budget category organizer, you would write the budget category in the box and then any spending that falls within that budget category. And maybe next month you get to a transaction, you're like, what did I put that under last time? You can come back to your budget category organizer. Oh yeah, gift cards are under my holiday budget category. Now it's gonna take some time, this transition, to find the balance of your budget categories and how many you should have and really simplify in this way is gonna take time. I would say at least 3 to 4 months for you to really hone in on your budget categories. But like I said, if you want the budget category organizer, I'll go ahead and put a link to this in the description of this video so you can have this free resource. And then make sure to come up with your initial budget categories. Now, when you start doing this process and you get to a page like this, that doesn't necessarily mean that's your finalized budget category list. This is just where you're starting. You get to make the decision on, okay, how much do I really want to break this budget category down? Do I need to separate out my eating out and my groceries? You know, miscellaneous, that's kind of an interesting one for me. My miscellaneous includes unplanned, unexpected expenses in between my paydays. But it also means, like, for instance, I put parking here because just last week I was downtown. I had an unexpected parking fee that I needed to pay to go into a business. And I put it in my miscellaneous budget category because I wasn't planning on making that purchase. I have a lot of people who said, well, Miko, shouldn't that go under your gas and car budget category? Parking is related to your car. Well, not for me. For me, it was more of an unplanned expense, something I wasn't planning for. So I put it under my miscellaneous. Do you see, though, how some people might put it under their gas and car? But I put parking here in my box just as a reminder, saying, hey, if you ever have an unexpected or unplanned parking expense, make sure you put it in your miscellaneous so I can stay consistent with those types of purchases. So this is the budget category organizer that's going to help you with consistency and organization. I currently use Mildliners. They look like this. And to also help, now I've been doing this for many years. I've been using the highlighter method with when it comes to tracking my spending. So I have pretty much all my colors memorized, but it might be helpful to label your highlighters. That's one of the things that I have done. That way I can keep that consistency and organization as well when it comes to my highlighters. Now these are the ones I use. I also really like the Sharpie liquid highlighters. And these are my true budget category colors that I'm using in my budget and that I have for many years. The first step when it comes to organizing your spending into budget categories is to start with tracking your spending. That's the only way you're going to know those initial budget categories in your life that are personal and unique to you. That can start with a blank notebook and just some colored highlighters you have laying around. The next step would then be to either simplify or create more budget categories based on problem areas you see in your spending. So you need to make the decisions on what you want to see and what would be most helpful for you to see when it comes to organizing your spending into budget categories. That's the most important part. Give yourself 3 to 4 months of a transition. Don't set anything in stone for at least 3 to 4 months. Give yourself some time to gauge what works, what doesn't work. Remember, you don't want to have 50 different budget categories and have that information be really overwhelming. You also don't want to simplify so much into, say, just 1 or 2 categories, because then that's not going to provide enough detail to be helpful. It's one of the #1 reasons I don't recommend having an allowance category in your budget unless you are working with a spouse. If you have an allowance category, let's say for instance you give yourself $300 a month for just spending, an allowance to spend on anything you want, then all of that spending, all that information with that spending isn't helpful, because you don't really know where it's going, what it's going to, what you're spending that money on. You just know it's going to allowance. And there might be a leaking part of your budget inside of that category somewhere that you're not seeing. So balance is the key here, and really doing what works best for you. If you found this video helpful, please like it and don't forget to subscribe. If you don't have enough budget categories and you've okay, let's start that over. It's one of the #1 it's one of the